Hey everybody, it is the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Beat-On, joined by co-founder, the legend, Rudy Gamble. How's it going over there, bud?
Going okay. Going okay.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it.
My Giants got a win.
They did.
They might have been. They might have been jobbed on a touchdown at the goal line, but then they somehow did a chancellor to win the game or to seal the game.
Yeah,
it's not bad. 2-3 is not bad. I can't watch any of the games because I haven't been going to the bars, and they cannot get on TV here. There was okay, well, Dallas isn't playing, which is the local NFC team for here, and it was like, yeah, no, we're gonna just put on another game, like that. Yeah. And I don't even remember what it was. It was like, I don't know. Is that really a better? It probably was a better game, but but it's impossible. Like, and if I ever get to see it, it's probably against the Cowboys, and then they suck.
I mean, you probably got what, like Green Bay, LA, I would guess.
No,
I feel like that was the only other NFC game.
Oh, then maybe it was. Maybe it was.
Just the bigger names and bigger markets for sure. Well,
yeah,
bigger than New York, but it was Giants Seattle at Seattle.
Yeah, not, but it's surprising. Yeah, I mean, I got to just see it based on the stats, but yeah, Daniel Jones seems to be a perfectly adequate quarterback. I mean, winning that game on the road without Neighbors is something.
Every now and then he does. He'll lull you into this false sense of security that he can do it.
Well, I mean, it's pretty. I think it's pretty clear. As long as he's generally healthy, he's going to have one of those like Dalton Flacco careers, where probably likely case is that he's not like a starting quarterback in like a year or two. Like maybe next year he's like a 1A, 1B for a team. But once a guy like shows this type of mild competence, you can't get him out of the league. They'll be like backups forever. He's like a perfect backup type quarterback. Maybe he could keep you afloat for a couple of weeks. He's probably good in the coach's room. He gives some Colt McCoy vibes, except he might,
he could see over the offensive line.
Well, I mean, like Colt McCoy and Chase Daniel had those like incredibly long, lucrative careers, and they probably showed less. They showed less than Daniel Jones.
Oh yeah, I mean, they never put up any numbers really. I mean, the two of them never had even a full season of real numbers. So no, Daniel Jones, I think you're cutting him a little. I feel like if he finishes out this season and the Giants are 2 games within 500, like they're probably just bringing him back.
Yeah.
They're probably going to tag him again, bring him back. Or
no, they don't have to tag him. He's under contract. They just have to. I mean, I think it's set up that you could get rid of him this year if he's a disaster. Yeah, I mean, and the great thing is, like, I guess even if you drafted a quarterback in the first round, you could still basically keep Jones for the next year. So, yeah, there's something. But it's almost so playing isn't making him look useless. Like where for Gardner Minshew, it might be taking a year or two off at the tail end to have him starting. Although that isn't great when suddenly your WR1 just doesn't play.
All right, Rudy, let's go ahead and move into, something for this for the game. Let's move into Atlanta, where Kirko Chainz showed up. This was full on Kirko Chainz. The first time he's shown up in Atlanta. 509 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Drake London had a great game. Darnell Mooney had a great game. Kyle Pitts had his highest receiving yardage since, I believe, his rookie season. All that, Bijan still doesn't break 100 yards. But what are you thinking in regards to the Atlanta offense? Obviously, bringing in new quarterback, new coordinator, new whole system. Like it was going to take some time. Do you feel like it's clicked? Do you feel like you can trust the Atlanta offense, or was this just a 1 week kind of blip?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the run pass splits, and so they started really conservative. They started out, like as if they didn't change coaches the first 2 weeks, but we knew that was going to happen with Cousins coming back and him gaining confidence. Didn't change in week 3, so I'm seeing them as like 50-50 run pass, which is slightly conservative. The last 2 weeks, they're at like 70-30 pass. I don't know why they're not very effective running the ball, but it seems like right now passing is their best. They're seeing as their best chance of success. So I think there is something there. It's 2 straight weeks. Now you're going to be visiting Carolina. Maybe the game script will call for less throwing in the second half. So I would say like one key thing with something like, looking at all those receivers is they've got the rising tide of a lot of pass plays. So I'm always looking at shares and saying, okay, if things contract to normal, what are we looking at? But looking at just next week, what I have now, I have London. I have London actually as WR 16, which is a little bit, but I have Mooney at 20. So you're talking about 2 top 20, 25 wide receivers. I forget, the third guy is still McLeod, but he really hasn't shown much. So you've got that's turning a little bit into a funnel. And, Pitts is like top 7, top 8. I'm with you in that I don't know. I don't feel confident that Bijan's going to suddenly just explode. I think he's good. I think he's really good, but until proven otherwise, I kind of see it that this is maybe the new normal for a Bijan, and that he might be. I don't feel confident in saying he's a top 3 running back rest of the season. I also found it weird watching the game that Allgeier was in the game during some pivotal points in the game. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely times in the fourth quarter specifically where they were going with Algier.
I can't get that good.
I don't know if that's run, if it's pass blocking potentially related, if it is. I personally don't think Algier is a better receiver. I wouldn't think that would be why. So the only thing I can really equate is that it's either pass blocking related and they don't trust Bijan to do that because, well, I don't think he's inept at it. It's not something he's really ever been asked to do before.
Right.
I mean, he was the offense. He was just give him the ball. If you're not giving the ball, let him leak out and give him the ball. That's the only thing I can think of is that they're not doing a lot of check downs to the running backs. They're not really doing a lot of screens. So without that involvement, maybe that's why Algier's in there, is just pass blocking. And when it comes to rushing, he has a better average per carry,
right?
But some of that's per, when he's in types of runs and everything. But he's not inept.
Right. I mean, I guess I'd look at it with Bijan right now is that he's pretty stably getting 2 snaps to 1 on Algier. I remember like the country. He only had 3 targets last week, which, here's he had 4 targets the week before, which was a 17% share. That's a healthy target share. It's obviously an peak Austin Eckler, but 18% targets is good. Last week, he had 3. That was like 10%. So you're totally right. Like, so he doesn't get, they don't throw as many screens for whatever reason, because it's just targets, not caring about receptions. But he's still got a good target floor. He's still got good run. Like everything is there. Kind of like probably could say the same for like a Breece Hall. And it's just a matter of like maybe the right game. He is poised for something. So I think it's almost like you have to set your expectations week by week. And it could be that playing Carolina is the week. So, but I would pretty much basically say yes on Bijan, London, Mooney, and Pitts this against Carolina, with the knowledge, with basically knowing like it's rare all four will hit. Like you almost see it as like when you say like, yeah, I'm liking all these pieces for DFS or for anything, for starting obviously in the league, but it's very likely 3 hit. And Bijan was the one that didn't quite hit last week. So yeah, I had Mooney on the bench in Fishbowl. I mean, it was, and I think I got hurt with it being a Thursday game because my projections, I might have been the highest expert on Mooney. And I think it's partially just because McLeod just is not getting the ball. And when you play that type of offense and you get enough volume, like Mooney's got to get targeted. I mean, you couldn't have hit London more. Like London, both Kirk Cousins and the defense couldn't hit London more. So I mean, I think he came out twice, and that's still with somehow Hodge. Hodge had like a couple snaps and he got the game winner. So I don't know. Yeah, this is what we see from Kirk Cousins. You're going to have a couple weeks like this. He's generally good. That this definitely this felt like what everyone was waiting for during draft season with London and Pitts, was saying, "Oh, imagine a new coach and a good quarterback. Not great, but a good quarterback, and maybe more league average pass rush splits." And yeah, so there you go.
And then in regards to Bijan, I mean, you think he falls to? I mean, I'm just thinking about it off the top of my head, looking at who scored what and what percentages are and everything around. I mean, I think he's coming in for like running back like 8 to 12, like he's a back end RB1, which sounds crazy given where we what we think of him and what the talent should be, but. I mean, the production isn't there. You just said the offense is changing more towards passing, rushing, and he's splitting carries. Like we thought at least he'd get the carry, like he'd get the snaps.
But I still have him projected right now going into the next week at like 68% of snaps. And last week he was at 67%. Maybe, it's negotiable. His usage is still really good. His skill set there is really good. So yeah, I mean, but any given week, I think he's a top 10 based on everything. And I think that game just was kind of more like a floor. But I wouldn't be, so I would not think, when I say, I think 3 of those 4 hit against Carolina, I don't think Bijan will be the one that misses again. I think I would think it'd be Mooney or Pitts. Like it's hard for me not to imagine. I feel like if London's healthy, he'll have a good game, at least a top 24 game. Where my guess is Mooney or Pitts doesn't have a great game, but they're both good bets. So we'll see. I think they'll figure it out. I'm trying to think in Minnesota. I mean, Cousins wasn't like inept at screen passes. I don't know if they've really had since maybe peak Dalvin. Have they really had a running back that you want to throw to? They got Aaron Jones this year, who's a great one. but I don't think that. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little more of that, and that Carolina does more to take away the wide receivers. I mean, you can't have. I mean, like, it's crazy. London with 13 targets, Mooney with 16 targets, and both of that. I mean, London had a yards per target at 11 or so. Mooney wasn't very efficient. If it takes you 16 targets to get to 105 yards, that's not very good. Yeah. Right. I mean, Chase usually gets like 7 targets and gets 100 yards.
Yeah.
I would think you'd look at this and be like, maybe we got to figure out a way to get Bijan the ball a little bit more. Just my thoughts.
No, I tend to agree. I mean, I feel like with Bijan's skill set, he should be out there maybe running some of the Mooney routes just to increase the efficiency of those short yardage. But yeah, Mooney seems like he's the, and if you're in PPR, he's going to be, very safe, I feel like. But in a non-PPR, like, you're really going to have to count on touchdowns, because 105 might be, the high of the year for yardage, unless he just runs away from somebody and has like a 70-yard reception.
Right. And I mean, it's crazy. I was saying, like, McLeod's not getting much. He's still got 9 targets that game.
So he got 9 targets. It's crazy.
I mean, and he's just very much a replacement level wide receiver.
Oh, yeah. Probably below.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So why don't we pivot to the next quarterback who had injury concerns and now appears to fully have the training wheels taken off.
Yep. It was Slim Shady Burrow showing up finally for the Bengals. Although now he looks a little more boy band than Slim Shady with he looks like he's got the old 90s frosted tips now. But Burrow went 30 for 39, 392, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick. Jamar Chase had 193 yards and 2 touchdowns. Higgins had 83 and 2 touchdowns. Let's start with the passing game first, and we can talk about the running backs. I guess we can throw the tight ends into this, and just I think it's to a point where you can't really feel good starting either Cincinnati tight end unless you're just desperate.
Yeah, I know. Look, so this game was definitely like crushed whatever the Vegas over under was. Yeah. And so and basically when that happens, it crushes my model. So I had Burrow as a fade because Baltimore is a tough matchup and they weren't projected to score a lot. And you certainly wouldn't have expected the play volume. I wouldn't have expected 39 throws, let alone that effective. So it was a bit anomalous, but I know one of the things I was looking at was, taking Gesicki down because I think his usage felt a little elevated in the beginning. And I was thinking of it a little bit because Higgins was out, but it may well be also because Gesicki runs short routes. And that might have been in the beginning really getting Burrow comfortable. So I'm with you. I think Gesicki and all are not fantasy relevant. Did the slot receiver do anything?
No, not really. I mean, it was pretty much just Chase and Higgins. I don't think the slot was used very much at all in this game. Andre Yosfas had 1 or 2 targets, I believe, and he's the primary guy. So
this was a big. So I mean, I know I adjusted Chase up a bit and I took Gesicki down, but I think this is now kind of telling me, like, when I look at a week like this, it's like, yeah, if you draw it up, you'd be like, you get these wide receivers the ball, especially Chase. That's your like top 1 and 1A priority. And yeah, if the other guys are open. But I think we saw like Tyler Boyd, his role just kept shrinking and shrinking. Like he had at some point in Cincinnati, he had a really nice year for PPR, but it seemed like every year you could rely on him less. And I think it was just because, well, why am I throwing it to that guy? And maybe now we're back. Hopefully Higgins can stay healthy for a stretch, and if Burrow's good, and because he makes throws that not a lot of quarterbacks are willing to make or could do. So yeah, I feel like we're back to previous years. Zach Taylor, we think through the Mixon years. One of the reasons we never saw a great year from Mixon is because Cincinnati liked to pass, and they didn't really care to pass to Mixon all that much. So Mixon never really seemed to put together the year that maybe his usage or his snap share as a running back would have suggested. Now, I think we're back to those days. So all of a sudden you have Chase as like a lock top 5 receiver. You could always argue it. Game scripts of that. Higgins is like top 20. You could play the running backs, but now that they have almost split up the Mixon role, it's really a crapshoot. And Chase Brown hit because he got a touchdown. But I don't have a good feel at all for what happens with that game unless unless one of them's hurt. And then I think they're probably a high RB2, which is kind of what Mixon was. Maybe he had low RB1 years in there, but yeah, it's when those guys are firing. I mean, Burrow is one of my favorite quarterbacks going back to LSU days. LSU, that was his one big year there because he makes some fun throws.
Yeah, he definitely does. It's kind of odd that in this game, even though he wasn't, used a lot in the passing game, Yoshivas actually had more snaps than T. Higgins did. And that's been a pretty consistent thing. Obviously, Higgins has been dealing with the injury, so maybe that plays the part of it.
It does. I think, it is weird and that's one where I've probably over the years, I look at snaps a little differently and a lot of stuff in that, and I know some people do this by looking at percentage of routes, but my guess is like someone like Higgins, like they got to give him more rest. He's not built as a guy who goes 85 to 90% of snaps. But when you see a stability in the targets, even at like 70, 75%, what it says is like they're probably when he's out of the game, they're probably a lot more likely to run. And they're just letting him rest a bit. Or if they're taking him out, maybe that's a design screen. Like there's some type of tell there. It's not coincidental. So yeah. And then, so I look at Higgins is one of those that could probably go at 70%, be great. And their slot guy, who I'm not gonna try to pronounce his name, might be there's plenty of these guys that play like 85%, and then you would never consider him fantasy relevant. I mean, Van Jefferson could play 150% of snaps. He might not be fantasy relevant. He's never moving on up.
Yeah, absolutely. With Brown and Moss, I feel like you can kind of tell by the game script. Moss is in favorable game script, going to be the guy. In a less favorable game script, they're going to split, but Chase Brown's probably going to be in there more. But regardless of game script, they're going to split. So it's not a great situation.
No.
I'm going with Moss if I have to going forward, because even in a game where they were trying to keep up, they were trying to score points, Zach Moss was still in there more snaps, even though he didn't get as many carries or as much work as Chase Brown. They're still trusting him to be in the game. So again, I'm going with Zach Moss still. He did have an ankle injury in the fourth quarter, so that's something to monitor. I think it was actually like the last play. So that's definitely something to monitor with Cincinnati, but assuming they're both on the field, that's the way I'm going. Now, if you remove one of them, I think we start talking about, well, not a great option, certainly much more trustworthy.
Right. No, we're on the same page with that. I'm looking at his stats. Chase Brown seems to be like he's had 3 targets each of the last 3 games. It's not awful. I mean, that's not that much different than Bijan. I'll say, though, the difference is Chase is basically getting his snap share compared to target share, or target share to snap shares, is quite good. It's just that clearly he's playing more on those passing downs and stuff like that. So, yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. I have Chase Brown in both my leagues. So I think he'll be a guy I'd start this week. I do feel like his role just slowly expanding.
Yeah, it's possible. It does seem like every team that has Zach Moss starts very high on him, and then eventually they're like, oh, he's just kind of a guy, isn't he? He's just mediocre. I don't know that Chase Brown's a whole lot more than mediocre, if I'm being honest, and that's kind of why I think it's just a weird one where it's going to go back and forth because neither one is good enough to really say, hey, this is my job. I'm going to get the work.
And I'm not sure with home against or on the road at Giants Stadium. I mean, I think the Giants have some good defensive players. I'd be more, at least, we got some of them tend to be in the front 4. I feel like playing Chase Brown is kind of a more of an upside play. With the thing of one, he can get anytime a running back gets a touchdown. Yeah, that basically, as long as he gets some usage, is good. So he got the cheap touchdown last week that I wouldn't count on, especially because they had so much volume. But he also does feel like a guy that can get one of those big play touchdowns. So you kind of have 2 bites at the apple, where Zach Moss, you're like, oh, there's you said Zach Moss 60-yard run, and you'd be what did he? Did he go out to Raising Cane's and bring back for the team? There's no why would they make a rookie do that? That doesn't make Jermaine Burton's role in Cincinnati should just be to do those runs. Why would you do that?
All right, let's move over from the Bengals to the Cowboys, where maybe some roles are clarifying potentially. Feels like the Cowboys might have finally settled on a running back. At least for now. And then at wide receiver 2, obviously there was the Brandon Cooks injury, which kind of came out of nowhere. He has knee surgery and now he's out. But it seems like maybe they have their guy in Jalen Tolbert to be the replacement. Let's start on the running back side. Rico Dowdle has 20 rushes for 87 yards, 2 receptions, 27 yards. Zeke goes 6 rushes, 17 yards. Hunter Lupke also gets 2 rushes for 6 yards. Dalvin Cook is somewhere on the practice squad, presumably, if he ever gets on the active roster. But it seems like it is Rico Dowdle for now, or are you seeing something different?
I mean, it is a bit weird. I'm just going into the snaps and everything, and I still only have Dowdle at 50%. And then just taking a look now.
No, it really wasn't any different. His snaps haven't changed.
It seems
season.
So basically, they're but it's weird. So Zeke, Zeke's not getting a lot of. It's odd. You'd think with his profile that if you're bringing him in, you're probably using him as the running back, to rush the ball. But that was not the case. Dowdle had Dowdle had 65% of the rushes on 50% of the snaps. Zeke had 20% of the rushes on 30% of the snaps. I mean, is Zeke just basically an extra blocker?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then the downside on that, I mean, there's no upside with Elliott. So is just like, is this basically saying that Dowdle is his role kind of like a Zach Moss? Like, I mean, I'm looking, he did have a lot of targets. He had 5 and 6 targets a couple weeks ago, but he's had 1 and 2 the last 2 games. So his target, so it's completely flipped. Like he had 6 and 5 targets on weeks when he wasn't playing as much. Now he's not getting targeted. I don't know. I think Dowdle is definitely the only rosterable guy here. If he just stays like this, it's fine. He's maybe like a lower RB2. I'm just confused and wondering if he's going to see both anytime soon, where he gets a game where he gets like 15 carries and 4 targets.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if it's a very odd situation that we're looking at here in regards to the usage and just like the play time. You know, it's not necessarily an offense that throws the ball down to running backs a lot. Even when Zeke was is at his best, you know, they didn't check down a ton. It doesn't, or at least it didn't feel like it. I know he had a couple of years maybe where he had 1 year where there were a ton. But other than that, I mean, I feel like it was a lot of just, you know, Zeke could block, and then if he got beat, he'd just turn around and maybe catch the ball. Right. But yeah, I mean, to your point, his route participation is under 18%. That's not everything for a running back, just because of running back position and how that works, but it's not really great. And you just hear the numbers. He's getting snaps. He's just not getting out into the game. And they're actually using Hunter Lupke a fair bit, actually, in lieu of Zeke, I think, to block as well. Just, you know, we're just going to have somebody back there to block. It might as well be a guy that's bigger and is a little more dedicated to it. Yeah. I think is the general thought process, because he had the same number of snaps as Zeke did.
Well, it's a weird thing. So generally, so basically fullbacks are just like, I almost take them out of the equation. Right. And generally you're going to have one, you know, your sum of running back snaps tend to equal the sum of offensive snaps. Pretty often, right? You're going to have one running back. You don't do 2 running backs very often. That's a unique offense. But basically to have when you have less, that's weird. And I usually assume it's an error. Like, oh, maybe did someone get injured? Like, why didn't Deuce Vaughn get in the game?
They have to go spread for
the
game.
Right. And I mean, like sometimes you go 0, but this team isn't going 0 running back when you've got, I mean, Tolbert's your WR2.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think you're right that they're treating to go with a 1 running back and it's your fullback is pretty rare, but there is signs, at least on this, that it might have happened like 20% of the snaps.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. It's also probably another tell because he's not running the ball that much either. So I don't like it. It seems very Mike McCarthy-esque to be so predictive, with that prediction being if Dowdle's in the game right now, he might be getting the ball. He's going to be geared up for the run. And if Zeke and Hunter are in the game, just assume it's a pass. I mean, I think they were at a combined 50% of snaps, and Hunter was on maybe with Dowdle and had like 4 carries, 5 carries, like not a lot of carries. So yeah, there's also the guy that went 3 wide receivers every down for like 5 years. So it does, but Dak, man, when Dak leaves, like that gets his issue. That gets like that team could just fall out down a shaft in terms of offense really quick. Right? I mean, you take you draft a team right now. You take Zach Martin, you take Lamb, you take Prescott, probably Ferguson. I don't know. I mean, who wants a tight end? But there feels like there's a lot of I think that team is real shallow in talent.
Yeah, especially on the offensive side. I mean, across the board, really. That's what happens when you have to dedicate, so much of your salary to 2, 3, 4 guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
their defense. I mean, I think that their secondary, they've had some bad injury luck. No one's got 5 cornerbacks and stuff. But yeah, on the offense, I mean, they went into the year eyes wide open with like Brandon Cooks and Jalen Tolbert as your 2 and 3.
Yeah. I mean, it's surprising that they're not bigger in these conversations for some of these veterans that are on contracts that can be moved. I know that they aren't not involved, but I feel like that's just Dallas, like a spin on media where like they have to throw Dallas's name in, like Yankees and Boston and anything baseball related. Like, he's a free agent, so I guess he could go to New York or Boston because they could pay him.
That's the only way you'll get a social media like from LeBron James.
Right. So you got to do what you got to do. But yeah, I mean, I think it's Rico Dowdle. I feel fine starting him. If you're starting him, anybody in this backfield, I would not start. I mean, Zeke is out. In my mind, you can essentially drop him because I feel like even if Dowdle goes down, like they're just going to throw the ball more. they're just not going to run it. Period. At that point.
No, I mean, I'm looking at it that. I'm looking at the projections and I've had Dowdle going the last 3 weeks going from at 46%, 45%, 50%. I mean, I almost want to bet on him at like 55% next week. I mean, because I clearly the usage is basically saying, there's only one guy we actually want to use. And, so I feel like in most game scripts, I think this is just I see this by end of year. Feels like Dowdle at like 60% of use of snaps. And I mean, the usage isn't going to change much. He's not going to run 30 times, but saying that like when you run 20 times on 50% of snaps, that's not very sustainable, except for that's like Derrick Henry's music. I'm trying to think.
It feels like the Cowboys are in like the right area as a team where like they may blow out like 1 or 2 games, but they're not going to really blow people out. They're going to be in the games because they're not a terrible team either. So it feels like they're going to be in the right area to where, Dowdle's not going to get game scripted out of a bunch of Avita.
No, I'm with you. So yeah, so I'm officially moving him to 55% snaps next week.
I like it. Let's talk about the wide receivers here real quick. I mean, Jalen Tolbert has 10 targets, 7 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. If you didn't hear it on the broadcast or on social media anywhere, Dak and Tolbert worked out together this offseason. So, obviously that's the breakout coming. That being said, he was the de facto wide receiver 2 on this one. Ferguson had 6 receptions for 70 yards. Lamb had 5 for 62. Kevontae Turbin got involved for 4 receptions for 50 yards. So it just kind of got spread around. I mean, I think everybody will in their mind take from this that Tolbert's the guy. He had 87 and a touchdown. Do you feel that confident, or is it like Lamb and then there's like 1 to 1.5 more useful pieces maybe?
Right. I mean, that was also on 90% of snaps. Yeah. So he got max usage. Funnily, I mean, Turpin's still only playing like 30%. His kind of role reminds me of McKenzie on Buffalo.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
And I think it helps having a guy like that. That is a guy that scares defenses. You don't want to overuse it. Unless you do, and then it's somehow Rashid Shaheed having a breakout year.
Yeah, it's either that or like it turns into Tyreek Hill, but I don't think
oh yeah. No, there's the good ones, and there's also that guy, Teron Austin, the web back. But in any case, no, I mean I feel like I just kind of get roles in my head, and like maybe guys could supersede it and stuff, but I see it like that. He's just like Tolbert right now. His snap share is safe. He's probably like a Mooney, where it's like, yeah, you're going to get a couple weeks like this. If you're on the field 90% of the time and the defense maybe doesn't worry about you, you can get a game like that. But there's just be other games where it's just nothing. Like, one of these like 4 catches for 35 yards and no touchdown games. So I think his floor is so low, and I don't think I think the ceiling is only if the game script has Dallas behind. So yeah, I'm a Lamb and Ferguson, and in terms of the wide receiver tight ends is the only two I would have any faith in at all. And I'm not really sure what happened with Lamb this game. I did see some lip reading.
There was definitely some arguments on the sideline with Lamb yelling at Dak, and Dak doing his best. I mean, Dak basically just not responding and just sitting there and taking the abuse. That feels very Dak Prescott. I mean, I don't think it's going to be an issue. There's definitely some misses on Dak's part in this one. But I mean, Lamb's going to get his. I'm not really worried about that. I'm with you. I think it's Ferguson, and then Tolbert's going to have some games, and then we're going to see what happens with the rest of, with Jalen Brooks and Kevontae Turpin. If maybe they get some more looks as we build up, but it feels like the Cowboys are pretty secure with Tolbert being, at least like a 75% snap guy at the minimum. And
probably about he'll probably be about as useful as Cooks was, which was not. Cooks may have that one crazy game at the end of the year. Add him to your best ball teams. Sure.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's move.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's move on. Nico Collins obviously has his injury in game. That always sucks because you start him and then it just goes to crap for your fantasy team. But looking forward, if Nico's going to miss some time, even if it's just this week or a couple of weeks, who do you think really benefits here? Diggs, obviously, the wide receiver 1 de facto now. He had 6 for 82. Dare was actually the second leading receiver with 6 receptions and 57 yards. Tank Dell had 4 receptions, 38. Schultz was involved for 4 receptions of 34. No Mixon in this one. So, I mean, Dare was really used quite a bit. 68% snaps for Dare, which seems like maybe a career high for him. What are your thoughts in regards to the Houston offense? Sans Nico, because Nico did a lot. I mean, he's a great receiver. He's kind of used in more of like a Debo type of role where he was getting reverses, he was getting screens, he was getting receiving work. Like,
right.
He was getting a little bit of everything. So how does this change the offense for you?
See, I definitely came into the year thinking that 2 out of those 3 wide receivers couldn't make ADP. And I did not have a good feeling on any of the 3. Clearly, what might have looked like a 1A, 1B, 1C situation was, I feel like Collins had shown himself, no, I'm the one. And you two are fighting for what's left, because I think in general, Diggs and Tank have definitely fallen off versus expectations. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm going more on feels than looking at a stat sheet right now. But I think what we saw last week, it might be the most likely. It's going to get spread around. The Dare thing's really weird, and it feels anomalous. I mean, so I would think they would try to get Tank a little more involved. Diggs, I think Diggs' role is pretty set. So I don't really expect that much more out of him. It might just really be what the defense gives him. And the question would be, what do you think the defense is going to take away? And so it ends up being that Schultz gets it. Schultz has one of these crazy 8-catch games, or the running backs get targeted more. Big question is whether Mixon plays or not.
Yeah, that's definitely going to matter. I mean, I will say when an injury happens in game, it's a little bit different in regards to taking stock of what happened, because in a normal week, if they know Nico wasn't playing, you get Diggs as the one, you get Tank probably working more in what Dare was doing, kind of a mixed role, and then maybe like Schultz works as the de facto wide receiver 2 scenario, or just something different than what happened, which, as you mentioned, Dare getting that much work feels pretty random. It feels like it's not necessarily something that's going to continue. Xavier Hutchinson or Robert Woods or somebody's going to get more involved.
You'd think. I don't know. I mean, it just had, like, Diggs is getting targets. I mean, I don't know if he gets more on it. I
mean, I feel like Diggs is just a really good possession receiver at this point in his career.
It does feel like
the breakaway speed to like take any play to the house is gone. I'm not saying he can't hit big plays, but it feels more he's going to be running downfield and get a long pass than he's going to run past everybody.
Right. And so he might be more likely, if there were 2 women running by, he might go toward the one that is running the shorter route because she's 8 months pregnant, is what you're saying.
Just gonna leave that one alone and not get us kicked off air, not get us demonetized, whatever for that one.
He's paternal.
I will say,
he's a paternal.
What do you think moving forward, though? I mean, I think Diggs is fine. I think if you've been starting him, you continue to start him. They seem to do, enough to keep him happy, because that's definitely part of having Stephon Diggs on the team. He wants touches, he wants looks, he wants to get in the end zone. They seem to be doing that for him. I don't think that's changing. It sounds like you're on Schultz as maybe a tight end on the move up. Do you like Tank in this situation? Do you think Dare maybe gets some more work, even if Mixon comes back? Or is this really just a Diggs and then like Schultz, and we're kind of praying around for the rest, kind of like what we were talking with Atlanta right off the top?
Yeah, except, I mean, like, Tank Dell seems like he should be playing a bigger role, and I'm not close enough to understand exactly if he's been hurt or what's the change there.
No, I mean, I don't think he's been hurt or anything, at least that has been reported. It's just he went from being the number 2 receiver pretty clearly to being the number 3. They're not going to give him Diggs. Snap, no. Nico's going to play, so he's just not on the field. He's definitely like working in different places, not necessarily a slot, but he's kind of all over the place. And I mean, he's short. Like, short receivers just I get carried over year to year.
You'd think if there's anyone you're going to scheme more for this, it'd be for Dell this week. So let's just say, I'll say, like, if anyone's going to really go above and beyond their role to date, it would be Dell getting more targets.
Okay, I like it. Let's move over to Jacksonville. Travis Etienne got hit hard on his shoulder. He had 6 rushes, 17 yards, 6 receptions for 43. Got a lot of his work in the first quarter and the first half. Ended up with 38% of the snaps. Tank Bigsby comes in. He had 40% of the snaps, 13 rushes, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 reception, 28 yards. And then Dearness Johnson gets a rush for a yard and 22% of the snaps. Do you think this is a situation where Etienne is losing his grips? Was this strictly just – do you think this was just injury-related? Even if it was injury-related with the way Tank performed, what are you thinking here in regards to the way Jacksonville works? Or is it all just a mess and you don't want any of it?
I mean, there's definitely the early obituaries for Trevor Lawrence. I've read a good one in The Ringer. And it's not like I disagree either. But that was a pretty good offensive week for them. I think Etienne's just been fine. I really think he's been miscast in Jacksonville. I see him as a guy who should only be playing 50% of snaps. Get him involved in the pass game. They might not be exactly the same player, but I'd compare it to how the Lions use Gibbs. That it's like Gibbs isn't meant to play 70%, or maybe he is. I mean, I would have said the same about Kamara, but maybe that's not the most sustainable usage for him. So go 50. I could easily see them going 50-50 at some point this year. For this week, I'll probably hedge it. But remember now, this is 2 straight weeks where Etienne has been at like 50-ish. It hasn't even been close to 60% snaps. I'd see this maybe a 55-45 situation now, which makes Etienne, I think, I don't even know if he's an RB2. I don't even know if he's an RB2 right now. And then Tank starts getting into the conversation of a flex play. But when we talk about having the conversation, it's like that's not your ideal starter guy, but I think there's something there. And I think that's always been the concern on Etienne. It felt like they used him a ton last year. He had the usage you would dream about for an RB1, but I just don't think it just doesn't work. It's just not ideal.
Would you take both Detroit running backs over him? I mean, since you brought up Gibbs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that speaks volumes about where he's at there. It's a great running back duo. Don't get me wrong, but to take both of them over Etienne at the beginning of the season would have sounded crazy.
I just think it's one where, but I also thought I was under the assumption, I didn't really think about it too much or run tape, but I always thought that Bigsby had kind of proven to be like a nothing burger of a pick.
They certainly didn't give him a chance last year. I mean, like it didn't seem like they were interested in him.
He didn't show much. So I think you're also just looking at a team that's like, the Peterson's on the hot seat. I think he'd try a few things. I think we've already seen that Etienne as a lead back isn't great. Maybe you lean into Bigsby. You dial up even more stuff for Brian Thomas. You even decoy Gabriel Bruce that much harder. Let's see how it goes. Make sure Christian Kirk either has a very good game or an awful game. Make sure he doesn't get stuck in between.
Yeah, I mean, and it does feel like a team that's possibly in transition if they don't get things turned around. They've got Etienne's contract. I think he's got one more year. Christian Kirk's got one more year. Trevor Lawrence obviously has got his money, so he's going to be around. But If they move on from the coaching staff and potentially from the owners has been mentioned as well. It's definitely a team that feels like it could look very different come next year, or if not next year, the following year. It's definitely going to be, kind of a new look roster.
Yeah.
All right, let's move over to your team. Let's talk about the Giants. No Singletary. He's out with the groin injury. Tyrone Tracy comes in, 18 rushes, 129 yards. He gets a reception for a yard, 63% of the snaps. Eric Gray gets in for 36% of the snaps. His biggest contribution was 3 receptions for 50 yards.
Yeah.
Didn't do much on the ground.
Well, his biggest contribution for the Giants, he helped. He definitely he got a touchdown assist on that fumble at the red zone. So that was his biggest contribution. But yeah, and well, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt there for the joke, but it's an interesting one where Tracy was such a kind of an interesting guy coming out of college because he was a wide receiver who kind of also ran, but I don't think he had much more than 150 carries career in college. But so if anything, you'd look at that like, oh, I'd say like a good parallel would be like those Memphis backs that came out, like Antonio Gibson. Is he the only one that's still around? McFarland was one, and there was like a third guy from Memphis that were just these great athletes.
Oh, Antonio Gibson?
Yeah, no, Gibson was is the only one I could, and McFarland was one.
Yeah,
and there was like a third guy but in any way, like the reality was that Gibson, he's been okay. But like, oh no, Pollard's was from Memphis. And that Pollard proved to be a very good, I think a quite a good runner, and never really crushed it in receiving, but fine. Gibson doesn't even seem to be fine as a receiver. And so I think the interesting thing is like I look at Tyrone Tracy, you'd be like, oh, well, did they use him as a receiver? He gets like 1 reception. They use Eric Gray as like a bit more of a receiving guy. And it's looking like Tyrone, I would think going forward, I don't think Eric Gray has a role if Singletary's healthy. But I think Tracy's role, he just keeps eating into Singletary's role. They really like him as an organization and trust him in a lot of situations. But I could see Tyrone finding a way to get to like 10 rushes in games. It's just unlike some of the guys that maybe so less than a Bigsby, maybe. And not the receiving options that maybe Chase Brown gets. So he's stuck in there. Singletary is still Singletary. I mean, he's an RB3. And I'll say that's the first sign as a Giant fan, seeing what Tracy did makes me feel a little bit better about not figuring out a way to get Braylon Hall. Given the running back room, that felt like so it's something now, because I think Eric Gray is as a jag.
Yeah, I mean he is. But yeah, I mean I think it sounds like I'm maybe a little more interested in Tyrone Tracy. I feel like
if Singletary's out, then I think Tracy's is an RB2 for next week. He's got juice.
Yeah, I'm saying even when Singletary comes back, though, I feel like Tyrone Tracy could work his way to the point he's the RB1 there. Singletary becomes the do everything backup, because that feels like I'm as big a Devin Singletary fan as that exists, but he's that guy. Like he's the do everything backup that is very solid if you need, if he has to be the guy to replace RB1. Tyrone Tracy actually looked like a running back. Like he showed as much in that game as I think we've ever seen from Singletary, potentially in any single game. So I think there's room for him to grow into more. I think Etienne, just because of his connection to Lawrence, the paycheck, like it's going to be like a 50-50. And then, we talked about, Bijan and Algier, like that one's always going to be Bijan ahead as long as he's healthy. Moss and Brown, I mean, that's just a gross situation. Like I just don't know the upsides there with that offense as much. So it's just different situations where you're looking around.
Yeah, Moss and Brown does not sound attractive.
No, although Moss might be the safest start of all of them, even this next coming week still, unfortunately. Let's move over to San Francisco. It's a little bit confusing. Obviously you draft CMC 1 overall or wherever you draft him in your draft. Hopefully you got Jordan Mason because he's a must start. And if not, I don't know. I hope you got somebody. Kittle, given the way tight end's gone, he's a must start if he's healthy. However, after a strong start, Debo struggled his last 2 after coming back from the injury. Ayuk blew up this week, but he wasn't really performing before that. What are your thoughts in regards to Debo and Ayuk in this? Do you need to see Debo be healthy again? Do you feel like this was Ayuk's, coming out party? Or is this just one of the situations where you have to start them both every week and just
no, I feel like we've seen this for the last couple of years that Debo and Ayuk take turns. So I don't see any there's no difference in their snaps or difference in their usage. The biggest, I think, from a receiving side, I think Ayuk is a little better floor. It's that we know we're getting from Debo 2 or 3 rushes. And I think one thing I learned in analysis is that it's not that just Debo gets 2 or 3 runs. Then those runs are disproportionately in the red zone. And we saw it's a weird change that's happened with wide receiver runs. I mean, we saw it last on Monday night, Xavier Worthy getting a rush, a run in the red zone like that. For whatever reason, like it seems to scheme really well. So that inches up Debo's floor. I took a little off in looking at him. I took a little off his targets, but I still have it as basically this is, I think the other thing that's hanging out there is that, Pearsall should be back sooner versus later. I don't know when he gets back though. And I don't think Pearsall, what he does is going to matter his first week. But that he might be a threat as a third receiver. So I don't know. I think Debo will have his weeks. I think he's got a multi-touchdown game in him in the next 2 or 3. But there's no way to know. I think the best thing that points in Debo's value tends to be as long as McCaffrey's out, his chances of getting a red zone carry. I don't know where his carries were this week, but I feel like he's due for a rushing and receiving touchdown game.
Yeah, I feel like that's on his way too. I don't think he had any carries this week.
He had
3. Sorry, he had 3 rushes this week. So I agree. I mean, you just have to be patient. I do think when Debo's injured, sometimes they'll still start him, knowing the decoy that he is, and that's really annoying for our game. I understand why they do it, but I really feel like that's something they do. If you watch the Netflix receiver show, you kind of got that feel at times from last year where Debo was like, yeah, I'm going to go out there and give it my best. And you're like, okay, so that really means you're just going to be out there and taking coverage. Got it. Okay. So I do think there are better games ahead for Debo. I think it's coming. But that offense just goes around and uses whatever they need to get things done. So, game script is going to matter and what their game plan is.
Yeah, I will say none of the three were in the red zone. He had one like the 30. It tended to be more.
That's not great for what we were looking for.
No, you kind of want that end around at the 10. And he basically has like this, he's behind 3 blockers kind of thing.
Yeah.
I listened. I had him as a top 5 last week, and I'm kind of pushing him down and trimming a little bit off the targets. But we've seen. I mean, he's been too good for too long. I don't have unless something comes out on a major injury. I'm not buying that. I think if it was, he would be playing 80% of snaps.
Yeah,
after what
I agree.
All
right, let's move over to Cleveland, where I have to ask, can you start anyone here? Can you feel good about starting anybody for Cleveland? Ford, we thought Ford was the guy. They're splitting now each week more and more. Him and Foreman.
Well, Chubb, Chubb. If Chubb isn't back this week, he should be back the next week.
I think he's eligible to come back this week, but I don't expect him to be back this week. But yeah, right. He's coming back at some point.
So I'd start Chubb the second week. Let's see how he does his first week. I wouldn't even start in his first week. It's just so dysfunctional. I can't believe Winston isn't starting, and I'm not even a Winston believer. Just that Watson really should just be thrown onto like a barge. So if there's a waterway that gets you from Cleveland to Staten Island, then just dump them there would be my call. So it's hard. It'd be hard to bench Amari, but I think I'd just play game script on that. And I think we hope, Amari gets traded. I think that'll happen sooner versus later. I'm just curious to see what they fetch for him.
Amari's got to be on the move. I mean, his contract is movable. He wants out. It feels like Cleveland's not. This isn't the year for Cleveland. It's definitely not. I think the problem is if you bench Deshaun, you still have to deal with him next year and probably the year after. So,
I mean,
do you feel good enough about it to sit him down and tell him we're going to pay you so much money in the next 2 years, but you're not?
I don't know. I mean, I think the reality is I'm not convinced. I actually feel quite confident saying if they drop him, I don't think he plays, and I don't think he gets signed by another team. I don't think he plays another NFL snap. I could see
him as a backup somewhere. I mean, there's some terrible backups out there, but yeah, I mean, the headache that comes with him.
I don't know. I mean, that's part of the thing I was saying with like the Daniel Jones and the Colt McCoy thing is that, and Chase Daniels, that backup quarterbacks cannot provide any headache. I think that was the Colin Kaepernick thing. And
he wouldn't get paid and still be a backup. That was his problem.
I'm just saying, like a lot of teams would not even consider it because second backup quarterback provides not supposed to provide any headaches. That remember Tebow. Now you could say again, he didn't want to be a backup quarterback and what they want to get paid, but I'm saying like that's just not the archetype. I don't know what the hell they're doing in Cleveland, but yeah, it's probably for the best at this point. They just drop Watson and because it's all sunk costs, and I don't think he's going to come back to bite them. If they cared about that, they probably should have let Baker go.
Well, I mean, Baker at the time was who he was. Deshaun at the time, other than just the other stuff, this outside stuff, had shown to be what we thought a really, really good football player.
Right. Yeah. Well, no one was. Yeah. The argument wasn't on the talent. It's fair enough. It just didn't work. So.
Yeah, it didn't work, and they didn't give themselves any outs at the It was just it's a very weird Browns thing to do.
One time
they're stuck with him for like at least 1 year and probably 2 years on. By the way, a ridiculous number. They owe him like $73 million each the next 2 seasons. So they're gonna pay him $145 million the next 2 years. That's crazy. On the receiving side, Amari, Judy, one of them tends to do okay, but it seems like beginning was Judy, then it was Amari, and then now I feel like until Amari gets traded, you're kind of stuck. Just hoping if you're starting one.
I mean, Amari's getting great target volumes, so I think Judy they had great, like last week. Yeah, Judy only had 3. So, but Amari's floor is fantastic. He's had 8, 12, 8, and 10. Now, I mean, I'll just take that volume. I mean, you can't put that on your bench. So, but I wouldn't be trading for it.
Yeah, you say you can't, but at the same time, you start looking at the points scored for you each week, and
I'm just saying,
it's a little tougher at that point. Right. But I understand what you're saying. He's getting the looks. It's hard to just bench 10 targets. Like that's 10 times that a player, and Amari may not be the same guy he was in Dallas or even 2 years ago, but like he's still a very good football player to get that many touches. Just it's going to be low end. I feel like even when it produces, unless he randomly gets like a 2 touchdown week like he did in one of these weeks. Let's move on to Minnesota. Aaron Jones, he gets injured. Ty Chandler, Myles Gaskin, CJ Ham, all kind of do a little split here. Ty Chandler gets 63% snaps. Myles Gaskin gets 7%. And then kind of that weird fullback thing where CJ Ham gets 32%. But there's only about a 10% situation here. Whereas when we were talking earlier about Dallas, it was like 20-25%. That's starting to get into meaningful snaps, but Minnesota's also shown that they kind of like CJ Ham in the game. Regardless, without Aaron Jones, we kind of know what happens with Aaron Jones. What does it look like without Aaron Jones?
I mean, I feel like this team's gonna just have to sell out for the pass. I think I haven't seen much, but I watched some of that game, and basically it felt like Darnold was trying a little too hard, making some passes that were like hero passes. I think for this offense to succeed, I think to have that nice balance to max on play actions makes the most sense. So I think the problem is if Ty Chandler is playing 60% of snaps, no one's respecting that. And you're going to set yourself up that you just throw you always throw everything at Jefferson, but I think you really need Aaron Jones for this offense to work. And I think without it, you still obviously start Jefferson, but I think you're basically stretching Darnold too much. And I don't think they could build a very effective running game with Ty Chandler. I think it's just that Aaron Jones gives you that, the receiving threat, maybe keeps Chandler a little fresh. So, and Gaskin is, I think Gaskin and Ham are obviously not fantasy relevant. So I've heard good things about Gaskin chicken, but or is that a beer can? It's beer can. It's beer can.
Yeah, not for our game. They also have Xavier Scott on the practice squad, but he's not really. He's kind of one of those positionless guys.
Yeah. So things. I don't know, that Minnesota start definitely didn't feel sustainable. So hopefully Jones is healthy. They got a bye week, right?
Yeah, they're on bye this week, so they've got time to figure it out. That's trying to only put one of the bye week discussions in the podcast.
Yeah,
because it may be completely useless because Aaron Jones could be back in a week.
It could be, but taking parking on Chandler if you've got an empty spot for the week would be advisable.
Yeah, it's definitely not a meaningless pickup, and that's one of those things where you can kind of get ahead of it. If you miss out on Tracy and Dowdle, then maybe, or in Tank Bigsby, then Ty Chandler's not a bad last option at running back for the waivers if you just have a spot.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and wrap it up with the favorite segment, at least my favorite segment, Asshole of the Week. I will go first and give you some time to think about it. I'm going somewhere near and dear to my heart. I'm going with the Bears. I have DeAndre Swift. I've loved DeAndre Swift since he came out of college. He's a Chicago Bear, so I absolutely love him. Obviously, that was tough going to begin the season. It has gotten a lot better. However, this week, despite Swift's good week, it could have been so much better if Shane Waldron hadn't called in Roschon Johnson to vulture two touchdowns. Not one, two touchdowns. Swift did all the work to get them in position for both of those touchdowns, and then they just gave it to Roschon. So upset. I swear on one of the Swift ones, Swift got in, and they the review didn't call it, didn't catch it, and they just brought Roschon in. Roschon had 10 carries for a grand total of 25 yards, but he got those 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, there you go. Hook 'em horns. Go Roschon.
So annoying.
Okay, well, I do have an asshole for the week, and I think there's a lot of people on this bandwagon, but George Pickens this week. It didn't cost me a game, but to have him starting and having Mooney and Bucky Irving and Jordan Whittington. I mean, I had 4 bench guys do better than him. I mean, you couldn't ask for just try. There's no competition for him. There's no one even remotely close to his talent level in Pittsburgh. There's no reason why he can't put together like a 1,200-yard year this year, even with Fields. It won't be I'm not saying it's a 9-yard per target season, but I'm saying he could volume his way into that. All he has to do is and he's certainly seemed to be lollygagging a bit and somehow getting into Tomlin's doghouse, which we know can be quite big. It's not the hardest doghouse to enter. But still, that's ridiculous. I have a sub 10-point game as an obvious WR1 for his team. Pretty pathetic. And yeah, I think I've got him definitely contemplating having him on the bench. I think he has got a good matchup this week that makes it a little tougher to do it. And wide receivers do have that weird tendency to bounce back. So I'll do that. I will say I'll add another feature, which is the Nelson Muntz week to everyone quoting that, making up a quote that the Patriots might move to Antonio Gibson because of fumbles, and treating that as actual news, and fait accompli, and then Ramondre has a top 10 week anyway. And so people there's definitely people that benched Ramondre.
Oh yeah.
And it's but there was never any substance to it. It was and maybe even the coach said he might consider it. That's not news. I might consider getting pizza tonight. It doesn't mean I'm getting pizza tonight. I probably am not, because I'm going to get overruled and I got to cook. Yeah. So I think that's the man, don't just take every internet rumor and just assume it's right. Like, yeah, you fade, you take a little off Ramondre for this week, maybe even the whole rest of the season. 4 fumbles isn't good. But we know what Antonio Gibson is, at least with like a Tyrone Tracy. There's like, we don't even know what he is. And then you see it. Like, oh, there was something. I knew it wasn't Eric Gray. Antonio Gibson, like, he's not it. He's fine. You know, but you don't break the glass on that. It ain't putting out the fire. That ain't putting out the fire.
No, we have seen the number of years that Antonio Gibson has fooled people is something that needs to be studied in a lab somewhere, because it feels like the definition of insanity a little bit. I mean, maybe eventually you'll have like the Cordero Patterson year in Atlanta where
maybe
like he just ends up on the right team who has nobody else and they just give him all the touches. But if that isn't this New England team, I don't know who it's going to be. Like that, we're running out of time, Antonio Gibson people. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know I've never thought Antonio Gibson was good. So
maybe we should just think of it as like right now, this is his perfect role. Let him be the backup. Like you get more years. You're never going to get that big paycheck. So why play? Why do all the work for the small paycheck when you could not do the work for the small? And when we say small paycheck, he's still getting 7 figures, but let him be the running back equivalent of Colt McCoy. You know who is that guy? Dearness Johnson.
You know, you just love throwing out random Texas backups. That's I feel like that is your butter. You're just prime spot.
Chase Daniel. Chase Daniel is the one who wins the money thing. I think
Roshan Johnson.
I like my Roshan Johnson, but what was I say that? Yeah, but Dearness Johnson is not a Texas Longhorn. That guy that guy is like, ooh, if you let that guy start for like. He's gonna have like a 10+ year career and not ever have to run more than like 500 times. That's who he should be emulating. That the third guy. But
I want to be the backup. You know, the backup quarterback. That's the ideal spot.
And then not maybe the third backup running back. I mean, Gaskin is like a super poor man, Dearness Johnson.
No, because when you're third running back, you got to be special teams.
Ooh, you figure. Well,
backup quarterback, no hitting. You don't get in the game. You get to wear a red jersey during practice. Like, I mean, yeah, you got to put in the time on the playbook.
Clipboard, visor.
Yep. Yeah. Be a good, just rah. Be a good clubhouse guy. Bring in the donuts. That's it. Just be that guy, and you'll be fine. I guess there's one last asshole of the week who wasn't that guy and hasn't been for the last 2 weeks. Breece Hall, where you at? We need you. Yeah, you're disappointing. You're disappointing us all.
There's probably a conspiracy about it. You have to ask his teammate.
He's played Denver, Minnesota last 2 weeks, 2 very good defenses. But I mean, he started at San Francisco and did just fine there. Yeah, Buffalo's coming up. A solid defense, but hopefully we get a little Breece Hall bounce back. But yeah, there's assholes of the week. There's the ha moment of the week. That's gonna do it for us, Rudy. If you have any other questions, find us on Twitter at Razzbeaton, at Rudy Gamble. Start Sit is live on Sundays. Go check that out if you haven't already. I sat in 2 weeks ago. It's a great time. Get through all Start Sit questions. YouTube.com/Razzball Fantasy, or wherever you listen to us or watch us. Like, subscribe, rate, review. That all helps. Good luck with your Start Sits and your matchups. See you, Rudy.